In this lecture, we're going to be talking about neuroplasticity and mental health. The big question that we're trying to answer is it possible to use your brain's plasticity to work on mental health illnesses and problems? And long story short, the answer is yes. Of course, there are exceptions, some things that are not very general that you cannot always apply. If a certain mental health illness is related to genetics, then unfortunately there's not a lot you can do. However, you can still use neuroplasticity to your advantage to get a lot of help. Mental health illnesses usually are all related to a change in the brain's chemistry. And since neuroplasticity, or your brain's plasticity, gives you the ability to change your brain's physical and chemical structure, we are not looking at an impossible question. We're actually looking at a really common scenario that just by controlling your brain's chemistry through neuroplasticity, this will have an effect and an impact on mental health illnesses that are affecting your mind's chemistry and physical state as well. But now, the first question is, how much did or can neuroplasticity affect our mental health? Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, obsessive-compulsive and phobic behaviors, epilepsy, and more occur because of neuroplastic changes in the brain. Just as we said before, these mental illnesses are doing a certain chemical change. And as a result, we can see that mental illnesses themselves are part of neuroplasticity. Because of these behaviors, your brain is changing its chemistry. And the more this behavior is repeated, the more it's going to become wired in your brain, and the more it will be hard for you to get over it. Most of the times, if there is a certain behavior related to mental health illnesses that is not treated properly, or that was not met by an equivalent that can actually reduce its impact, it will become stronger and stronger and stronger every single day. And eventually it becomes unbearable that you need to see someone and use medication or use some therapeutic sessions. Now, what we want to achieve is to build something else in your brain, to use your brain's plasticity to build another system that can work on lowering the impact of a certain mental health illness that you have. It can even get to a point where you have full control over it. Just by having some triggers or some cues that you use, you can get yourself out of this mental health state at any time. And furthermore, the question is it possible to overcome a mental health condition through neuroplasticity itself? You need to be able to differentiate between building a new system that can help reduce the impact of a mental health illness or overcoming a mental health illness itself entirely. And the former is way easier than the latter. As we said before, some mental health illnesses are genetically based, and you cannot really ever completely overcome them. You can just build systems that can reduce the impact or even make the impact disappear, where you have full control over this condition. And Michael Merzenich, in his book, Soft-Wired, How New Science of Brain Plasticity Can Change Your Life, he explains and he says, imagine a person is born with a brain that has an inherited weakness that affects her ability to develop strong and reliable associations between the information about the real world and the ability to record things in her brain. And this weakness in working memory and memory association degrades her ability to predict the next expected events. Now, compared to a normal individual, a very large number of events will be unexpected surprises for her brain. And surprises gets a special treatment. We release noradrenaline when we have an unexpected experience that occurs, and it alerts our brain in ways that assure we pay attention to it to determine whether or not that surprise represents a danger or a potential reward for us. If the surprise is interpreted as neither or, the brain also shoots out a pulse of dopamine. Dopamine contributes to that little splash of curiosity or pleasure that is frequent companion of the unexpected. He continues to say, while a measured amount of these brain chemicals have necessary and positive effects in most people's brain, an imbalance in modularity, neurotransmitters like dopamine and noradrenaline can have severe consequences. If I were to artificially inject enough noradrenaline into your veins, you would become intense, paranoid, and anxious, he says. If I were to infuse enough dopamine into your brain, you would begin to hallucinate, become delusional, express your thoughts in a disordered way. If that dopamine poisoning was elevated enough to reach a high constant level in your bloodstream, it would have another insidious effect. It would amplify the difficulty that your brain has in controlling its memory associations and predictions. With its associative and predictive powers now fatally wounded, your brain would become a surprise machine. It would now be almost continuously dosing you with abnormally high levels of noradrenaline and dopamine. We call this particular failure mode of self-organizing plastic brain schizophrenia. The author, in 2 pages, explained how schizophrenia is related to neuroplasticity and how it's actually formed with us without us even realizing it. And moreover, Alex Korb, in his book The Upward Spiral, using neuroscience to reverse the course of depression, one small change at a time, he says, in depression, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the brain. It's simply that the particular tuning of neural circuits creates the tendency toward a pattern of depression. It has to do with the way the brain deals with stress, planning, habits, decision-making, and a dozen other things. The dynamic interaction of all of those circuits, and once a pattern starts to form, it causes dozens of tiny changes throughout the brain that create a downward spiral. So whether we want to use neuroplasticity to help ourselves get out of this mental health illness and be able to build a system that would reduce its impact, we need to be aware that at any given point, neuroplasticity is contributing, whether in a positive or negative way, towards your mental health illnesses or other people's illnesses. So if you don't adopt a positive neuroplasticity system that can actually help you, you'll be forced to accept the effect neuroplasticity on your mental health conditions or other people's conditions in a negative way. Whatever you choose, neuroplasticity is going to take place. We did talk in previous lectures about how phobias can be formed throughout memory, emotions, and experiences. And other mental health illnesses like anxiety, social anxiety, or general anxiety is directly linked to neuroplasticity, linked to experiences, memories, and emotions. Any past experience that was linked with even small dosages of anxiety would, with time, if not treated or healed, it will affect the person even more. There will be higher levels of anxiety every single time he faces these experiences. So long after the triggering incidents are past, the echoes of those can still be found inside the brain where they were wired. And eventually it just doesn't become an anxiety. You're just uncomfortable. You don't want to do something because you're uncomfortable, not knowing that this discomfort is actually coming from this urge in your brain to move away from an anxiety. And one of the biggest problems when it comes to an anxiety is that it produces stress hormones. It produces more stress hormones than actual necessary. And when we have stress hormones related to a certain experience or topic, this will not let us be able to focus on other things. When we are stressed about something, we can't think clearly because all what we think about is this thing. Our entire system is alert. And because threats are given higher priority in brain changes, any activities that can take place in these times, and it can have a major impact on neuroplastic change. These include our coping mechanisms or avoiding behaviors that we have when it comes to these anxious situations. And at the end of the day, we want to ask ourselves, is there a solid solution? Now, the solution is a 3-step solution, actually. By following the 3 steps, you'll be able to build systems and try to overcome mental health illnesses that you have or help other people if they're trying to overcome them. And the first step is to often refer to introspection. Become aware of the problems, how they occur, their effect on you and on your surrounding. You need to know these mental health illnesses. How are they showing up? What times a day following what events? Is there a certain pattern that happens before these mental health illnesses surfacing? Is it just random, or is it actually something that is fixed at certain periods or at certain experiences? And even if you couldn't really figure out what's causing the problem, like the root of the problem, when it's happening or how it's occurring, it's fine. Because you need to find exercises, and whether you found something, you found a link and you build exercises on weakening this link that you found. Even if you didn't find anything, you can still use exercises because you're very well aware what the thoughts are. If you're having negative thoughts towards, let's say if you're having anxious thoughts, or you're just having some negative thoughts about life, then you know what the exercise should be. There are tons of exercises that you can find online or in books that would actually teach you how to step by step start to overcome these mental health illnesses. And by repeating these exercises, you are doing what we call neuroplasticity. You are contributing in the process of neuroplasticity by changing whatever structure was in there and changing it into a completely different structure through these exercises, and of course, through the third step, which is repetition. Neuroplasticity is all about repetition. So if through introspection you found the source of the problem, then you can direct the exercises and the repetition towards this problem. And even if you didn't, you can just start using some general methods that are linked to your thoughts and your ideas and your condition. Build some exercises around them that can help you overcome them, and especially make sure that they are hardwired in your brain through repetition. Once you do all of these different steps together, and you actually build a link and a bridge between them, you'll be able to control whatever mental health condition you or other people have through systems that you can eventually build. A good example would be, in case you found the source of a problem, let's say you feel anxious when you are out, you have social anxiety, and you found that the source of the problem is, for example, your body. You're not really satisfied with your physical appearance, and every time you're outside, you start doubting yourself and asking a lot of questions about yourself when it comes to your body image, your physical appearance. So the solution would be to work on a body image that you're more satisfied with, a body image that would make you feel comfortable. But let's say you didn't find the source of the problem, and you just say, yeah, whenever I'm out, whenever I go out, I feel social anxiety. I don't feel comfortable in social situations. And the solution would be to start addressing these problems. Maybe start using affirmations every single day when you're walking outside. Instead of thinking about some things, you would start using affirmations, repeating things like, I am comfortable in social situations, or I am confident. These affirmations that can actually help you with the process of neuroplasticity to control these problems that you have. Even if you don't know what's causing the problem, you can still control them. And when there's a lot of repetition, you'll get to a point where you can ensure a lot of control over them. Whatever the situation is, you'll have a lot of control that can help you even more.